At the flea market on the outskirts of the city, the air smelled of dampness and antiquity. The sky was overcast with gray clouds, and it seemed that it was about to rain. Everything here had a strange look, as if time had stopped and all these things were frozen, waiting for someone to notice their forgotten history. People wandered between the rows like ghosts, examining old books, porcelain dolls, lamps, and mirrors that seemed to hide other worlds. My new home was empty and cold, with white walls that seemed endless. I wanted to find at least something that would make it a little warmer. But, wandering between the rows of junk, I understood. The things here had not so much value as history. And then, amidst the chaos, I noticed a painting on one of the tables. She immediately caught my attention, although she looked old and cracked. On the canvas was a woman in a long gray dress, standing in the middle of a dead field. The ears of wheat, which should have been golden and alive, were gray-black, as if scorched by some ancient fire. The sky above the field was frighteningly stormy. Dark swirls of paint and strokes resembled lightning, but their flashes never reached the ground. The woman stood motionless, frozen, like a statue. Her face was invisible, only blurred features under a wide hat. Black hair fell to her shoulders, getting lost in the folds of her clothes. But what worried me most was her gaze. Although her eyes were not actually visible, I felt them piercing me, as if she saw me through the canvas. "Good choice," the elderly woman behind the counter said suddenly, her voice husky, making me flinch. She lifted her heavy eyelashes, and her eyes sparkled as if she already knew what I was going to say. I bought the painting along with a few other things, a worn-out lamp and a chair. The saleswoman took a long time to wrap my purchase in old newspapers like a funeral shroud, and the whole time she looked at me with a mysterious smile. For several days, the painting stood in the corner of my bedroom. I could not bring myself to throw it away, although every time I passed by it, I felt my heart start to beat faster. At night, when the room was plunged into semi-darkness, the painting seemed to come to life. It seemed to me that the woman was changing her position, as if her figure was moving subtly on the canvas. On the fourth day, I decided to hang the painting on the wall. I couldn't explain why I was drawn to her, even though an unexplainable anxiety was growing inside me. From that moment on, something changed. My room began to feel different, as if it had lost its warmth. I began to notice shadows that had not been there before, and they were getting thicker and thicker. A few days later, I saw the news about the forest fire in Kansas. The picture on the screen was exactly like the one hanging on my wall. The same gray dead fields, the same ominous sky, only without the woman. Her figure had disappeared. It seemed like a coincidence, but deep down I felt that it was not. I tried to convince myself that I had imagined it, but fear became a constant companion. Another week passed, and by the door I found a small package. Inside was another picture. It depicted a train that had derailed. Flames engulfed the carriages, smoke rose into the sky, and debris scattered in all directions. But even in this chaos, a woman in a red scarf caught my attention. She was reaching out to a child who stood aside, as if petrified with fear. I didn't understand where this painting had come from. No one could have sent it to me, because I hadn't told anyone about my first purchase. But this new painting was a reality that had not yet arrived. That same evening I saw the news. A train had derailed. Flames, smoke, debris. Everything was just like in the painting. But the woman and child were not mentioned among the victims. Every time I entered the room, a silence filled with invisible tension enveloped me. The paintings that now hung nearby seemed to be watching me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were changing when I wasn't looking. And at night, I began to have dreams. In them, the woman appeared. Now she was closer, her face more expressive, and each time her eyes were different. Empty, black abysses from which stretched shapeless shadows. Her gaze was heavy, it suffocated, and I woke up gasping for breath. With each passing day, the pictures became not just images, but harbingers of something terrible. But I didn't know how to stop it. I felt a chill run through me like the hands of an invisible ghost when I discovered the first painting. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, a small and unremarkable one. depicting the destruction of an old bridge covered in fire. But over time, such paintings began to appear more and more often and in the most unexpected places. In my mail, right on my doorstep, and sometimes in my car. Each of them was a reflection of something catastrophic. Deadly storms, flooded cities, burned forests, and people screaming in pain and fear. Confronted with them, I felt these paintings penetrate my thoughts, filling every corner of my consciousness, like a plague that infects everything in its path. They stalked my thoughts, as if I could not escape this spiral of horror. I couldn't sleep soundly. Every moment spent at home felt like a fraud, as if my home was no longer my refuge. It wasn't just scary. It was as if these paintings had a soul of their own. They were following me, threatening to eventually swallow me whole. And then, one morning, when I woke up and opened my eyes, I saw another painting. It was placed right next to my bed, like a signal, like a warning. On the canvas was an old house, forgotten and neglected, and inside it stood the figure of a man in a dark coat, the same as mine. It wasn't just a painting. It was an invitation I couldn't ignore, even though my soul screamed not to go. But fear filled me more and more. But curiosity drew me forward like a magnet. My hand trembled as I took the painting in my hands, feeling my finger press against the rough canvas. My thoughts became more and more confused, and I could not tear myself away from the image of this house. All these pictures, like invisible threads, connecting me to this ominous reality. I found this house, neglected, gloomy, and dark, like in those terrible dreams that sometimes visit us when we can do nothing. It was located in the countryside, like a place where time has stopped, where all memories and living souls have been forgotten. And when I stepped on the threshold, I felt the damp darkness penetrate me, like an invisible force. The air was thick and suffocating, as if it had been in this place for too long and had nowhere to go. Its smell was musty, like an abandoned basement that had not seen sunlight for years. The walls seemed to live in darkness itself, silently absorbing my every move. I couldn't shake the feeling that this house was watching me, that my every step was heard in its callous walls. And there, among these terrible paintings, I saw him, a man sitting, absorbed in his drawing. His fingers, hunched and covered with dust, moved, drawing a new picture. He was absorbed in his work, drawing another picture that was to become part of this endless series of disasters. His eyes did not rise to me. He simply continued to draw, as if I were only a shadow that had passed through his life. His indifference was even more terrifying than the paintings themselves. His posture was silent, his movements had become mechanical, and he did not react to me. I felt my heart clench with anger and despair. "You saw patterns that others ignored," he said, his voice cold and indifferent, as if he felt no emotion, even when it came to death and destruction. His words clouded my consciousness, as if I had fallen into a bottomless abyss. I felt a shroud of fear envelop me, and each of his words became a knife that cut deeper into my heart. My anger, rage, and helplessness took over. "You could have warned people. You could have changed everything," I cried, trying to release the emotions that filled my soul, even though I knew it would change nothing. In his gaze, I saw the same indifference that seeped through each of his words. It was scary, like a cold wind penetrating the very soul. His laugh was short, dry, as if he were mocking me. "No one will listen," he said. "People want to believe they control everything. They believe it's all just a coincidence. And you want to change the unchangeable." My heart beat faster. I felt it breaking with powerlessness. All these paintings, all these disasters, these endless horrors, they weren't just paintings. They were something bigger, something I couldn't comprehend. It felt like I was part of something huge and terrible, part of a nightmare from which there was no escape. And I couldn't leave it like that. My hand trembled as I picked up the lighter that was lying on the table. I could feel the cold metal touching my skin, and my fingers clenched in a fist trying to hold it. My heart beat like a drum in my chest, breaking the silence that reigned in this place. I walked up to the painting and, with anger in my voice, shouted, You're just a coward watching the world fall apart. I threw the lighter at the canvas, ready to put an end to this nightmare. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't live with these ominous paintings anymore. It had to end.